I found an article about a year ago that said I was one of the top 27 content producers in the world. So I'm right there with Seth Godin and Ryan Holiday and Jeff Godin. They had my name in those 27 people. It's because my blog has over 1,700 entries in it. I blog every week. And so there's a lot of content in that blog out there.
Right.
And um, I I really have changed since 2007. That's why I have a large social media following. Uh, why I'm doing all the different things I'm doing, like this podcast here, because I want to help people and I want people to know how they can actually do something practical and be successful with their life.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people watching us from around the world, they say, okay, we know where Canada is. In British Columbia, West Coast, right? Right. And then we got that big city there called Vancouver. We are 500 miles north of Vancouver, or 800 kilometers for our friends around the world and Europe in particular. And Prince George is a city of about 85,000 people, about 120,000 in the region. Within 50 miles, we have 100 lakes. It is lots of forests, lots of trees, lots of nature, lots of friends, our animal friends, black bears, grizzly bears, caribou, deer, foxes, you name it. We have it all here, living in harmony. Today, a very interesting podcast. The guest is Terry Whalin, and Terry is an accomplished editor and an author of more than 60 books, several of which have sold over 100,000 copies. He has also contributed to over 50 magazines, and he has an amazing experience in obviously a lot of things to do with books, in particular marketing, distribution, and he's going to make several offers to the people that are listening. And first and foremost, Terry, tell us about your past, how you got there, where are you living, where are you now, and then about your past, and obviously you're an amazing author, and tell us a bit about that, what brought you to that, and what is happening today.
Yeah, John, thank you for this opportunity to be here. Very delighted to do that. I live in Southern California. We moved here about a year ago. Our youngest daughter and her family live about 10 minutes from where we live. So that's why we live here.
Beautiful.
But I've been in publishing for a long time. I actually was the editor of my high school newspaper way back when I started writing, and I thought I was really hot stuff when I went off to college. I went to Indiana University, one of the top 10 journalism schools in the country, and joined the newspaper staff. I think I rewrote my first story 4 or 5 times before it actually appeared in the newspaper without my name on it, and it was only like 3 paragraphs or so. So they quickly taught me that I had a lot to learn there in Indiana to become a published author and a published journalist with them. I sort of lived and breathed writing stories more so than my classes even back then. And about halfway through my sophomore year, I was sitting at an old Royal typewriter, trying to get my fingers on the right keys. This is in the pre-computer days. And back then, when you made a mistake, you just backed up and X'd out and went on. My editor, I knew, would be upset with me because my copy was going to look terrible. And so I kept muttering to myself, Jesus Christ. And this little blonde-haired girl that was sitting next to me turned to me and she said, "Oh, Terry, don't say that, because one of these days when you really need Jesus, you'll call out for him and he won't be there." And I thought, what is this? I'm a Christian. I go to church when I'm at home. I read the Bible in church when I'm at home. John, I had no idea what I was even talking about then. She sent me down to a little bookstore a couple of blocks off the Indiana campus. And she said they had pretty cards and posters, and maybe I'd find a book that interested me. So I wandered down there a couple of days later. I bought this book called Jesus the Revolutionary. I thought, how in the world could Jesus be revolutionary? And I took that book back to my room, read that book, and it showed me a different side of Jesus than I'd ever seen before. And about that time, somebody invited me to a Jesus People gathering in downtown Bloomington, Indiana. We were all sitting on little scraps of carpets with little candles lit. And those people in that room had something that I didn't have. So I got a Bible, and I've been going the Jesus trail with my life ever since. And so instead of, I thought I was going to like join the Chicago Tribune or the Indianapolis Star, one of those places. Instead, I ended up joining a group called Wycliffe Bible Translators. And I spent my first 17 years with them. I worked in Guatemala, Central America, among the Southwest Cachiquel people. And then I wandered back to my writing, and that's kind of where I've been ever since. But I know the reason I do this whole publishing thing is because I know books change people's lives, and I know that firsthand because a book changed my life.
It did mine too. And so 60 books though, Terry, is amazing. Like what I always say, I was a late bloomer. I'm just turned 84 about 2 weeks ago, November the 1st. And I was born in Holland, as you likely know, and I was not a success story academically. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And then they said, what are we going to do with this guy? Send him to some people said, send him to the mentally challenged school. They said, no, we're not going to do that. Let's teach him a trade. My grandfather was a master carpenter. My dad was in lumber. So they said, well, let's send him to a furniture factory. And then maybe we make a furniture maker out of him. Now, I like lumber and anything to do with that. So at 13, I went to a furniture factory and so worked there. And then until I was 17 or 18, then I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force for 2 years. But the other thing that changed my life really is that I was born in November the 1st, 1940. And obviously it was a tough time with the Second World War. Saw far too much that we should not have seen. As a result of it, it obviously affected our family. My mom and dad fell in love. They were married in 1938. Very quickly had a boy and a girl, and then my mom was pregnant with me in 1940, and then Hitler decided to invade not only the Eastern Europe, but also started invading Europe, in particular the Benelux or Holland, in about May of 1940. My dad was called into the Dutch army in April of 1940, and for the last time they saw him was just before the bombing of Rotterdam. Then for 5 years, they would not hear from him and would not know if he had lived or died. But thousands of people did die in that bombing. Then obviously the next thing that I remember is hundreds of planes overhead, the Allied forces bombing the northwestern part of Germany that touches on the North Sea, where there were a lot of factories making machinery. And at nights, daytime, nighttime bombing from 1970, 43 forward, there were hundreds and hundreds of planes in the air. My mom, we lived in northeastern Holland, 10 minutes from the border. My mom would go outside on a flat deck behind our house, not because to look at the planes, but she felt safer outside than inside. In the distance, we could see the cities burning. The sky would be red, all the way Wilhelmshaven, Kiel, Hamburg, all those places in that region. And then the next thing that I remember, we were liberated by the Canadian Army as part of the Allied forces that had landed in Normandy in the summer of 1944. And then the Canadian sector made its way through France, Belgium, the west coast of Holland, pushed them out to the north back into Germany. And so April the 12th, 1945, our city was liberated by the Canadian Army. We saw far too much that we should not have seen. I still remember it, but at the same time, the winter of 1944-45 was extremely difficult. The fall already was difficult because the Germans had cut off all the food supply. Lots of kids died because of lack of food, or elderly people that were vulnerable. And, so it was a real tough going. And so what we did, my brother and my sister, 1 year, 2 years older than me, every morning we would go with gunny sacks in the railroad yards, pick up anything edible and burnable. And the reason that we did as kids, because the Germans would kick us in the butt, but they would not shoot us, and we just came back the following day. So the next thing I remember is being liberated by the Canadian Army, April the 12th, 1945. And made such an impression on me that I always knew from that point forward, 5 years old, 4.5, that I would go, once I grew up, I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And so it took me till I was 23 until I did that. And so, but I was not successful academically, as I said. And in Holland, it is so that the friends that I had in grade 7 and around that age, they went on to college and university, but I became a laborer. I'm proud of that today, but then I was kind of looked down at. And, but I kind of felt I had to start anew with nothing. And to prove to me that I was just as good as the other ones. And so I got a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, took very little money, and then decided to go to British Columbia. Couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job. And landed in Montreal by plane, wandered across Canada, 4 days, 5 nights. Can you believe it? It's a big country. Arrived in Vancouver, went to the immigration department, and I could speak English, but fortunately there was a German fellow. I told him what I wanted to do. He said, go to Prince George. That's where they're building sawmills and pulp mills. That's where the opportunities are. Now, Prince George then, as I said earlier, about 500 miles, 800 kilometers north of Vancouver. Took the bus, Greyhound. I can still see it here in the distance, 60 years ago. And came off the bus here, 14 hours actually, came off the bus here in Prince George, was then a boom town, much smaller than it is now, was a boom town. And so with my suitcase, my 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money at least 3 times. I had $25.47, but what I had lots of attitude. I'm always positive, no matter what happens, even then already, no matter, I avoid negative, don't talk to me about negative. We are so fortunate in my mind. Passion, whatever I do, I give it 125% in work ethic. And I work harder than anybody, and even now, at 84, I still get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed, and I always think I'm late. But every day, after having been working for about 71 years, I still enjoy every single day. And yes, for those people that wonder, I did buy my mill, and I built mills and 10 other companies, and I'm a very active podcaster. And then I'm also an author. Started very late. I'm working on my 6th book, not 600 or 60, right. 6th book. But people said to me, hey, John, you have had such an interesting life. You should write a book about it. Now, I don't have to tell you and a lot of other people about it. That is, writing books is not easy. And so So I thought about it for 20 years. Started, stop, start, stop, start, stop. Now I knew enough about it. If you do something, I was going to write a biography about the history of my life and all the things, the ups and downs that I went through. And then it had to be right. So I did as much research as I could on what to do about it. So I wrote my first book, Against All Odds. And so it took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. So from that point forward, I kind of got the bug in a way because I'm a storyteller. That's who I am. I do that in the presentations that I do that in my podcasting, I do that in my books. And so the other part that I referred to and that I talked to you earlier about is that as one book in your life changed your life and the direction of your life, the same happened to me. I went into a bookstore here in Prince George, and it was January 1997. I picked up a book. I have the book right here, the actual book that I picked up, all kind of wore out. And so you're going to say, okay, John, show me which one. So the book's title is Driven to Distraction.
Oh, wow.
Written by Dr. Halliwell, medical doctor. And so what was the book all about? I had no idea. It was all about ADHD. And I said, oh my God, that's me. And so I wrote in the book that I picked up. I was standing in the bookstore. I went through it and through it and through it. After half an hour, the bookstore guy said, we're going to buy it or what? No, he didn't. But, so I bought the book. And so then I wrote in the book in Dutch because I was ashamed of it, because it implied that it was a deficiency of some sort or mental disorder, and it had stigma attached. I wrote on it, now I finally know who I am. January 1997. So Dr. Halliwell, that wrote this book in 1993, I bought it in 1997. He is ADHD and there's this dyslexia, and so do I. I'm ADHD and I have dyslexia, and obviously PTSD from the war years and the inner child. And so the more I found out about ADHD, initially it implied maybe 8% or so of the population. I didn't think so. I thought it was much higher than that. And so that your podcast number 349 for me, that I'm hosting. I've done about another 150 where I'm a guest. But podcast number 203, I podcasted Dr. Halliwell.
Fantastic.
And so, as I was interacting with him in my podcast, and I urge people to watch the podcast because obviously very, very interesting, is that I believe that on the population basis that it is at least 20% of the population is ADHD. He said, no, John, it's probably more than 25%. I agree with him. The other thing that we did and talked about is that in all the things that I've done, building companies, being involved in businesses, board of directors, all of that stuff, interacting with business people, top business people in a lot of cases, and entrepreneurs, I believe that, and I suggested that to Dr. Halliwell, he's the expert, not me, other than living it, that probably 50% of the successful and operative is successful entrepreneurs are ADHD. He said, no, John, probably 75%. I agree with him. And so, that then being said, the more I find out about ADHD, and the more I learned about it from Googling and speaking and reading and more about it, is that I call it a superpower. And I believe that it is not a liability, it's an asset if you know how to use it. And
That's
so
fantastic.
I wrote a book about that, ADHD Unlocked. And so that was very important for me to do that. And
Sure.
so from my perspective, and so you can pick up the book, open it anywhere, go forward or backward. It's all very, very interesting as it relates to ADHD. So that's kind of, and then since the time, I want to show you one more book, that the last one that I did is that certain triggers happen in our lives that we change direction. You said that already on the one part, and I'm sure that it has happened numerous times in other areas as well. But for me, in 2008, I had a case of diverticulitis, and for our guest watching, is that I'm not a medical doctor, but if you have pain on your right side, then somebody would say, well, appendix maybe, or on the left side, potentially diverticulitis, which is your digestive system or your colon in particular. And I had a rupture, and that puts all the toxins into your system, attacks the other. So it requires fairly quick action to repair it. So they took out 20 centimeters of my colon, but I came this close. And so to not making it. And so up to that point, I was not abusive in terms of not eating well or of my body, but my wife is vegetarian. And so, but I didn't listen as well to her as I could have, should have. And so, but that kind of changed things where I said, okay, I have to do a number of things. And I'm like many other people. At the end of the year, we make a decision. I'm going to do this, that, and I'm going to buy a membership in the gym. And then 2 weeks later, we can find 100 reasons why we are too busy to go to the gym. And so that is the normal thing that I went through, and a lot of other people do as well. And then the other part was, to me, understanding diet and listening to my wife more. So I became vegan, close to being a vegetarian, really, 90-10 probably. And so I do all the shopping now in the grocery, but if I go to the grocery store, I stay out on the outside in the store, because I don't want the super processed foods, because I don't know what is in there in the cans. And so,
Sure.
and then the other thing that I did, I went to the gym and got myself a trainer, because that creates a commitment for me to go. And then after about 5 or 6 years of going to the gym, somebody came up to me. By then, I'm already in my late 60s then. Somebody said, hey, John, have you ever thought going to compete? I said, me? Really? Yeah. And so I said, why not? Started competing or working, getting ready for competing bodybuilding with my trainer. And so bodybuilding and physique. And so competed in Northern British Columbia, came in second bodybuilding, third in physique, qualified me for the provincials. Again, the same happened, qualified me for the nationals and the Arnolds. And so so what I'm doing now, again, I'm training for the 2025 Arnolds. And so that's how I look now at 84. And then I will be 85. And so I love it, going to the gym. But more importantly is that I was lucky that a number of things changed my life. Meeting the Canadians that liberated us triggered me to have the dream to go to Canada, to the land of my heroes. The second one was that I knew, although everybody said, well, this guy has a problem mentally and all the other, all the things that they say. I knew I was just as smart as the others, but I had to prove it to me. And so my dream was to build a lumber mill, go to Canada, build a lumber mill, but I wanted to start with nothing. And so I did that. And then the next thing that changed my life is this book, ADHD. And now I knew what laid on the foundation. And then understanding the result of the war years that changed our family life and everything around us, as things do that are going through this. And then the other part was probably nearly losing my life because of diverticulitis that triggered me to look at diet and exercise. And so today, after this podcast, I'm going to the gym. I do that already for the last 15 years, since 2009, save and except a hiccup in between COVID. But I say everything is possible.
Sure.
And that circumstances that happens along the way, as it did to you, can change someone's life. And so then the key became for me later in life to start writing the book Against All Odds. Since that time, I've written one book a year. So I'm working on my fifth and sixth
Fantastic.
one. And so I'm a presenter, and then I love podcasting, because that not only, if I do a presentation, which I do several keynote presentations, I'm in demand, but a lot of times if I go from here to the States, it takes me at least 2 days, and I still do that in some topics, especially as they relate to entrepreneurship, ADHD, and all the other things that are important to me to share with others. I can do that much more effectively to do it on podcasting. As we know, you and me having this discussion, that millions of people around the world will watch us at some point, because it's the new media, extremely powerful. So that gives you a bit of my background. And so
amazing stories, John.
So tell us about you, though, Terry, in terms of, so you went through that. How did you must be writing pretty much all the time now as a career.
I am. I started writing a children's book. Actually, is where I got started. I went to a writers' conference, and I met an editor at that conference that told me she had a problem. And whenever editors tell me I have a problem, I want to listen to that. And right. She said that her problem was that as an organization, they were supposed to help children learn about the world, and how that they didn't have a single book in their whole line of books that showed anybody that. And so she knew that I worked for a missionary organization, and she asked me, "What kind of ideas do you have, Terry?" Well, it turned out my kids were small back then, and I was reading these books, and I knew that Stephen Lawhead, that writes fantasy, had written some children's books. And he had these children's books that combined real pictures with a cartoon character to help kids be able to visualize it, called Howard Had. Howard had a spaceship. Howard had a hot air balloon. And so I looked at her and said, what if we combined real pictures from the missionary organization that I'm with a cartoon character to show kids in different occupations that they could go anywhere? She looked at me and she said, "That's a good idea, Terry. Write that up and send that to me." So I made a little note, and I went home and wrote it up and sent it to her. Now, that first thing I didn't get published. I mean, I had to go through a lot of gyrations to get it, but it ultimately became my first book that was published in 1992, a little children's book called When I Grow Up, I Can Go Anywhere for Jesus. And So from that, I continued writing for magazines, but then I've had all kinds of opportunities, John, through the years. So if somebody asks me to do something, I make a little note. I go home and I write it up and send it to them. And I've just had incredible opportunities to write books for different people, write biographies of people like Billy Graham, Chuck Colson, Luis Palau, people like that. I've co-authored books with a number of different people through the years.
I saw
And
those. Yeah.
yeah, it's just been incredible the opportunities that I've had. Now as an editor, I'm working at my third publishing company, John. So I've worked with hundreds of authors over the years, and what I've learned is that I'll meet somebody at a conference and I'll say, "That's a great idea. Write that up and send that to me." What I find is probably only 10-15% of those people will actually go home and do that. And so I was one of the few people that actually did what people ask me to do. It's that simple sometimes. And so I've just had these great opportunities through the years to write books for a lot of different people, and I'm still writing books. Absolutely.
So, what is the key? One of the biggest things that we have found, and obviously, I have the benefit that I'm not relying on my books for income. It's just something that is important for me to tell my story, and then hopefully it will be successful and others will believe the same. So, what we do, I write the book, have people around me do the editing, all of that stuff we do internally, and then be our own publisher. I've not committed my books to anybody other than we trying to do that ourselves, and it's still a work in progress, because publishing and bringing it to the public is quite a challenge. It doesn't go easy, and and I saw this one from you as well, and you will comment on it. I printed it off actually on Google.
Yes.
And including this $10 gift that you have and the $200 benefit. We want to do that. So, but very interesting from a marketing perspective. But what do you see as one of the biggest challenges for writers? First and foremost, you have to write something that is reasonably good and that is a market for the books. Then you have to make sure that the product looks okay, like the first one that I did. The cover has to be right, the fonts has to be right. If there are pictures in the books, they have to be right, and all of that. So it has to be a good product. What do we do? What do we do? Yeah.
The reason I wrote 10 Publishing Myths here is because I find that a lot of these authors don't have the right expectation about their book. They don't. There's so much of the publishing process is outside of anything we can control. And so what I tried to do in this 10 Publishing Myths book was help authors have more realistic expectations and then understand the things that they could do. And so that's why I'm offering the book, like you said there. I have this website. If you go to publishingoffer.com, you can, like you say, you can get my book for $10, including the shipping, along with $200 worth of bonus.
I just wanted to show that because what I did this morning, I got your bio, but then I thought I'll just go to the Google, and so this is what I printed off, the $10 offer, which I thought was interesting because the book is the actual cost or the sale price of the book is in $14 or so. So it's already a good deal. It is full of good information, so it's a brand new book. And then you get and what you will receive, A paperback copy of 10 Publishing The Myth is one. Free Buzz Your Book, Marketing Matters Guide, which is very, very important too. And 50 actionable ideas to sell more copies of your book. Very, very useful. You get that. Get free mileage out of the content guide. How to sell your books into libraries. And all of that information is very, very attractive, and you virtually get it for nothing. And so for the $10, so that creates what I thought is, certainly we're going to order it, creates an incentive right on Google.
Yeah, no, thanks, John. In my experience, the part of the reason I do this stuff too is in 2007, Mark Victor Hansen, the co-author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, invited me to come out to Los Angeles, where he was having this big event called Mega Book Marketing University. I was a literary agent back then. I had a small literary agency in Arizona. So I flew out to Los Angeles, took pitches from people during the conference, but I also sat there with 400 people listening to the different speakers and entrepreneurs. And one of the speakers there was Jack Canfield, the other co-author on the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. And Jack has written this book. It's a best-selling book called The Success Principles, where he's analyzed success. And during that conference, he told us about that book. And frankly, back then in 2007, I wasn't very successful with my own books. I had a little terrywhalin.com website, but I wasn't doing really anything to promote my books. I mean, publishers were giving me advances. They were making pretty books. They were getting them in the bookstores. But publishers would notify me once a year or maybe quarterly how my books were doing. And I was getting negative royalty statements from these publishers. So I knew I wasn't making any money. And Jack talked about how the first principle in the success principles is that I will take 100% responsibility for my own success. Now, none of us want to take 100% responsibility. We want somebody else to do it. We want some editor, some agent, some publicist, somebody else to do that other than us.
Who can be blamed?
I decided during that conference that I was going to change. I was going to take 100% responsibility for my own success.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started blogging. I mean, they say there's over 600 million blogs out there. I found an article about a year ago that said I was one of the top 27 content producers in the world. So I'm right there with Seth Godin and Ryan Holiday and Jeff Godin. They had my name in those 27 people. It's because my blog has over 1,700 entries in it. I blog every week. And so there's a lot of content in that blog out there.
Right.
And I really have changed since 2007. That's why I have a large social media following. Why I'm doing all the different things I'm doing, like this podcast here, because I want to help people and I want people to know how they can actually do something practical and be successful with their book.
So that then being said, Cherry, other questions that come to mind is, how are you doing so far because of all the things that you did? You indicated you sell with the books that you, a lot of them are sold well over 100,000 copies. Is it, so what is the most important part in your mind? Hard copy, soft copy? How directly involved are you? As you said before, is that if the books are not moving, then we'll have to find somebody to blame, not necessarily us, So, but that once you're beyond that and know that is not the case, because ultimately it is the writer that has to make sure that the book moves forward and give it exposure. Then
It does. It's one of the key things. There's a number of key things when you make a book.
Right.
You were telling me that you're self-publishing your books, and the average self-published book sells 200, 100 or 200 copies during the lifetime of the book. So many of those self-publishing books don't go anywhere as far as that. But there are over 11,000 new books that come out every day. That includes the self-published books. So there's a huge volume of things. So one of the keys, I think, to getting your book out there into the world is the distribution of your book. And that's one of the things that we have figured out at Morgan James Publishing, where I work. I've been working for the last 12 years. We've been in business for over 20 years. We produce about 180 to 200 books a year, but we're selling those books into 98% of the bookstores in North America, including the brick and mortar stores. So we're not just on Amazon. I mean, Amazon is a big customer of Morgan James, but they're only 24% of overall business. So if you just publish with Amazon, the way I look at it, you're missing 76% of what we do for the book. I mean, up where you are, we sell at Chapters, Indigo, all those bookstores. We're selling books there. So you want your book to be available everywhere where somebody can walk in and buy it. The other day I was looking for one of our book covers, and the very first place I found it was at Target.com because we sell books at Target. So that's one of the keys, I think. And also, you want to go with somebody that's got integrity with their publishing outfit. And how in the world do you do that? I mean, there's all these people that'll take your money, and there's scams out there, really. And so
lots of them.
What I encourage people to do is to go to Google and type the name of the publishing company in, and then put complaints or scams with it and see what comes up.
Yeah.
If you do that, you're going to help yourself, because you want to go with a company like Morgan James Publishing, where I work, that we've got a track record,
Exactly.
21 years we've been doing this. We've printed 25 million books over the years, 6,000 titles, 29 New York Times bestsellers. You can't do that if you're not selling books out there in the bookstore.
Now, the other question that I have is, do you also, your books, do you also publish in other languages? And if so, why? And if not, why not? Because that appears to be, at least as I look at it, for the kind of books that I do, there is a giant market out there in other languages.
No, that's a good question. We do have somebody that works full time on getting books in other languages, and some of our books are in 20, 30, 40 different languages. But in general, the book has to take off in English before we get much traction on the other languages front. But we definitely do that. We try to teach our authors, John, not to use one word. We teach them not to use the word Amazon when they talk, because most bookstore owners believe that Amazon, right or wrong, has destroyed their business over the years. So I don't really care if your book is an Amazon bestseller. So you just want to tell people that your book was a bestseller rather than an Amazon bestseller, or that you have 100 reviews rather than 100 Amazon reviews. You just keep that word Amazon out of there.
Yeah.
You can imagine a number of years ago, we published 4 or 5 years ago, we published this book called The Bezos Letters. Now, I didn't write the book, but you can't avoid publishing a book like that and using the word Amazon. So all of the national distributors banned that book. They didn't carry the book in Barnes & Nobles or Books A Million or Chapters Indigo because it had the word Amazon too much. But the book became a bestseller. It was a Wall Street Journal, USA Today bestseller, which is on the cover of the book. So it's continued to sell these 4 or 5 years it's been out. So this year, all those retail accounts decided to carry the book. So success overwhelmed them so that they had to bring it into the bookstore because they knew it was going to be something to sell.
Now, I had the Bezos writer on my podcast, correct?
Steve Anderson, maybe?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, Steve Anderson.
I forget now which podcast it was, but yeah, I did. So interesting. Okay.
That was one of our books. Yeah.
My God, can you believe it? Yeah. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to send you all my books, all 4 of them that I have so far, and I'm working on the 5th one. But just for you to have, I'm going to sign them and then send them to you. And then, if you can, give me an opinion on them as to what your organization can do for us potentially.
Sure. I'd love to see them. That'd be great.
So that's what we will do. Okay, so let's go a little bit further then. So now we have all these people watching us. A lot of people have that, I want to write a book, and this has, hypothetically speaking, this has been on my mind for a long time. So what do we say to them? What I would say to them, it's not easy. Writing a book is complicated, difficult, not easy. But I encourage them to do it because it gives them satisfaction. Do not have expectations that it will sell tens of thousands of copies or anything like that, because it's, from my perspective, a slow process. But write a book because it's immensely, it feels good for oneself, and then it potentially has other potential. And so if you want to do it, then I encourage people, but realize it can be costly if you don't know what to do and how to do it. So the more information one gets, like this podcast, extremely helpful, because you and your organization, your experience, and then in particular this, the $10 book, and then the $200 or 10 publishing myth are important to learn, plus all the other additions that one gets will give them a good foundation for one. But the more information one gets before they do, and the more they look at the experience others have gone through, the more prepared they will be to write a book.
Absolutely. The other element here, John, that I think is important for every author is whether they self-publish or whether they go with a traditional publisher, they really need that business plan or a book proposal. And it's hard to write these book proposals. I freely admit that. So as an acquisitions editor, frustrated acquisitions editor, years ago, I wrote this book called Book Proposals That Sell, 21 Secrets to Speed Your Success. Now, they can get that book, that ebook from me for free. You go to bookproposals.ws for website, bookproposals.ws, and it'll pull up a site where you can get my book proposal book for free. Now, why would I do that, John? Why would I give it away for free? We give it away for free because we've learned at Morgan James that if we do that, there is a high probability if that person gets that book and starts to read it, that they're going to go buy the print copy of the book.
Yeah.
So giving away a free ebook, you don't lose anything. Basically, you're driving print book sales by doing that.
Makes sense.
All of us thought when ebooks came out that they were going to overtake print, but the reality is really something different. Marcus Duhay, who was the CEO of Penguin Random House till about a year ago, I heard him say a couple years ago that worldwide it was 85% print and 15% digital. So the print books aren't ever going to disappear. They're going to be around forever, and so we don't have to worry about that. But it's really print that's driving everything rather than digital at the end of the day.
Now, the other thing that I did, Terry, for your comments, is that mine are hard copy, but I do also the audio of it. Although I'm ADHD, and then obviously reading to me doesn't go easy, So, but I believe that is very, very important to do that. So it takes me longer than it would be somebody that is not affected by those issues.
Yeah, no, we do audiobooks for our books as well, and you don't have to read it as the author. For example, for my Billy Graham book, I had somebody else read the book rather than me, but I had to listen to it 4 times to make sure that all the words were straightened out and everything in the audiobook. But we love audio and produce our books in audio as well.
So that's what I've done with all of mine, and I believe that is important. I'm going to send you these, and then so the other part then is that Amazon, and and I'm not going to mention the name too often, but but it's an interesting story because the guy Jeff Bezos started the whole thing in his basement for all intents and purposes. Started as a bookseller, and then from there on progressed into this amazing organization that we have today. But books are still a very important part of them. Would that in a way have helped the interest of the public in books? And secondly, would it have helped the public regardless in having, I like the touchy feeling of a book rather than, so we have ebooks now, we have audible books, we have soft books, but there is something about that I like about this, so the question is, in your mind, that if I look at this, amazing success story, Amazon, blah, 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 for all the reasons that we all know, but that's how it started. And did it open the door wider for potential authors, and that everything is possible? Add to that podcasts like you and me are doing here for nearly the last hour is talking about all the fundamentals of it. And for me, being an author at very extended age, I started writing 5-6 years ago when I was already in my late 70s. So everything is possible at any time, for one. No different than I did with, I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America, at an older age. And saying age is just a number. It's quality of life that is important, physically, but importantly, mentally, because it stimulates your brain to work. If you're writing books, you're reading books, or you're podcasting. And so in my case, the close to 500 podcasts, and I love it. And the whole world is there watching because it's still only at its beginning. Now, podcasting is going to go much, much further. And so we approaching 650,000 subscribers on YouTube. That will go to 1 million probably by towards the end of the year or early in the new year.
Wow.
So, amazing how powerful it is, and it can be.
Yeah, I think that books are going to be here, and I think books are still a foundation of Amazon, but authors just need to make wise choices where they're actually going to publish their book and how they're going to get it out there. People think, well, I'll just go to Amazon because that's free. Well, you get what you pay for in some ways with
And
that.
that's always the way it is, right?
It
You
is.
get what you pay for. But the other part, Cherry, though, that my experience has been, I've always had an interest in books. I'm not until about 5, 6 years ago when I started writing it. But even before that, I was checking it out, becoming informed. But there is so much information on an aspiring author as to what to do, how to go about it, how to publish, where to publish. There's so much information. That's why I'm not here. I didn't get paid for promoting your material, but this is worthwhile. There's no question about it, that the value is here, the experience is here, and for the guest watching us, as you already said, go to your company.
Publishingoffer.com. We'll pull it up. Yeah.
Yeah, pull it up and ask for comments. And so, but it's an amazing offer that shows a lot of the questions that we still have even today. So I will get it from you, and
Well,
yeah.
and John, what I always encourage people to do too is, I mean, writing is a solitary business. You do it alone, I do it alone, but really we need to be connected to each other. And so one of the things that I usually encourage authors to do is to invest, to get to a writers conference. Whatever kind of book they're writing, there's probably a conference for that, and go there, because who you know is almost as important as what you know. So that those relationships that you're making with those people is very, very critical and very important in that process.
So, and I agree with that. And I have not done a whole lot of that because I'm way up in northern British Columbia. But there's no reason that we should not go to conferences like that, which I intend to do probably next year as well. But it's immensely rewarding, and just finding out about success in particular that you have had with your books, and understanding the whole dynamics behind it as to what can make it successful. I've had a lot of people in Europe that I refer to it that are buying our ebooks online because it's so interesting, and that's why marketing becomes so important, not only in North America, but starting in North America, proving success, and then looking at other markets potentially. But it may well take a long time. That's always the way I look at my books. They will be interesting as we go forward, and at some point it may take a number of years, but they will become successful.
They will, and I usually encourage people to not just write books. I mean, as you mentioned, I've written for more than 50 magazines. I'm a former magazine editor. One of the easiest things that anybody can do is to write a magazine article, because, I mean, if a book sells 5,000 copies in the lifetime of the book, that's good. So it's easy with magazine articles to reach 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 people with your article. And maybe that's 500 words or 1,000 words. And at the bottom of that article, you could say, John Brink, author of, and tell people about your book. That's a simple thing that every author can do, is to write for print and online magazines and get the word out about your book much more than you can with trying to sell books.
So the other thing that I'm doing, Terry, just to bounce it by you for your comments, is I'm working towards a platform that I'm going to start early next year that deals with a number of issues 24/7. Already we've been quite successful on podcasting, and in some cases I'm quite active in the lumber industry here in Canada, in North America, but in Prince George. And every so often what I do is I do, because I have so much following that it is getting the attention. Oh, I lost something there. So that we get the attention from a lot of people watching our podcast around the world, but even here in Canada. And obviously with approaching 650,000 subscribers on YouTube alone, very, very powerful, and saying that maybe what we should do is do also solo podcasting on some of the books that I've done, and what the whole objective of the books is, why I did it, and success stories, and as a possible area for marketing.
That sounds like a good idea. There's the old promoter of the circus, P.T. Barnum, used to say, his saying used to be, without promotion, something terrible happens.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah. Barnum and Daly. Very big success story, right?
Yes.
Terry, any further thoughts? We can go on for another hour, and we should stay in touch. What I'm going to do, I'm going to send you copies of the books here in the next couple of days. You'll receive them next week. Scott will get the information from you. Now, for all the people watching us from around the world, check out Terry on Google's, and in particular the offer that he's offering there, the opportunity to get access to a lot of expertise is very important. And then for both of us on our podcast, if you like what we are doing, the variety of podcasting that we do, then subscribe to our podcast, share it with others, like it if you like it, or give us comments on where we can improve or what else we can do. So that becomes very, very important. Terry, it was a privilege and a pleasure to have this discussion with you for the last hour. And I know for sure, we'll stay in touch.
Thank you, John, for the opportunity. I just appreciate it and wish you all the best with On the Brink. What a great podcast you have here.
Thanks, Terry. Appreciate it. Take care. Okay, Terry, you still there?
I'm still here, yes, sir.
Yeah, so that was the podcast. So the other thing that I do with my podcast, we release them very, very quickly. This one will probably come out today, Scott? Yeah, we'll release it today. We release our podcast within 24 hours. But I've had in the past, I've been on other people's podcasts, and then I say, when will it come out? They say, well, in about January. I say, what year? So no, we don't do that. We do 24 hours. The way we present it, I seldom make changes to it. And the one time that I nearly did do some editing is I introduced my guest, and the next thing, all of a sudden we had an earthquake here, and I said, blah, blah, blah. I didn't swear, but I said, what do we do now? So we looked at it later and said, should we edit it out? I said, no, we'll leave it in. An earthquake.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm gonna email you my home address for those books so that you can know that. I'll get that to you.
Okay, and then as we will send those to you, and then we also want to get involved in you, giving us opinions in what else you can, and the corporation as well. But what else you can do for us? We'd be very, very interested in that.
Absolutely, I'd love to, John.
Okay, Terry, take care.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Bye-bye.
Bye.